The war in Ukraine has been going on for quite some time. Russia's military aggression against Ukraine has affected not just both countries, but also Europe and the world at large. Considering the amount of power that the United States holds, many feel that the Biden-led administration has been weak and timid in dealing with a major world conflict. In fact, the Russia-Ukraine war is the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. However, when asked publicly, Biden has always commented that he doesn't want a major war on his hands, and he has promised that he will do all he can to resolve the situation without significant escalation. Now, some may see this as a signal that Biden wants peace. However, Putin will definitely see it as a weakness for America, and it's no surprise that he has continually threatened nuclear action if the U.S. were to intervene directly. What has been Biden's strategy for dealing with this conflict? Has the U.S. been acting weak? What does Putin think of U.S. intervention? Let's find out. Welcome to my channel, and today we'll be discussing how Biden's presidency has reacted to the Russia-Ukraine war and the effects on the American economy, the EU, and Europe in general. The Russia-Ukraine war has been one of the most discussed topics in the world today. As tensions rose between both sides in February, Putin launched an invasion of Ukraine, which he called a special military operation with the aim of liberating Russian separatists fighting against Ukraine in the Donbas region. What started as a small military campaign has blown into an all-out war, which has led to thousands of deaths, and more than 5 million Ukrainians have been displaced. The war has also led to the destruction of many important infrastructures, historical sites, hospitals, schools, and even energy plants. The war has been going on in different parts of Ukraine. However, the major fronts are Kiev, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv. Throughout this war, Putin has made an important point of attacking basic Ukrainian infrastructure like energy plants, schools, and administrative offices, all in a bid to diminish the spirit of the Ukrainian people and weaken their resolve. Although this has barely had any impact on Ukrainian morale, Russia has continued its attacks on civilian structures. The response of the international community, particularly the EU and the US, has been strong. Nobody, even Vladimir Putin, expected the West to respond to the Ukrainian issue with such intensity and unanimity. Despite the opposition of several European Union members, including Hungary, numerous economic sanctions on Russia have been put in place. The public in the EU and the US is sympathetic to Ukraine's plight and open to taking in refugees. In addition, they are ready to pursue sanctions even if they harm the West as well. Despite historical hostilities toward refugees, particularly during the Middle East refugee crisis about 9 years ago, countries in Central and Eastern Europe are now showing unprecedented support for Ukraine's EU membership. Given the altered political and security landscape, the EU and NATO are certainly more influential in Europe than at any other point within the last 2 decades. At the start of the war, the West imposed several economic sanctions on Russia to cripple its economy and put President Putin between a rock and a hard place. The sanctions had the desired effect, as the Russian economy came tumbling with a record low GDP figures. Banking sanctions were also imposed on Russian banks, which greatly limited their abilities to perform international transactions. The sanctions have also hit Russia's local currency, the ruble, very hard, with the currency hitting its lowest point in recent years. Furthermore, various sanctions have been imposed on Russian oligarchs believed to be part of Putin's inner circle. Alisher Usmanov, popular Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich, and Igor Sechin, who is one of Putin's most trusted advisors, were sanctioned by the US, EU, and the UK government. These sanctions have meant that they lost all their assets in Europe or the US, including houses and businesses. They have also been banned from entering most European countries. Putin had previously warned Russian oligarchs to protect their interests and assets from future sanctions by limiting most of their investments to Russia, particularly after he annexed Crimea in 2014. Despite these stiff sanctions, many still feel the West, particularly the Biden-led U.S. administration, has not done enough for Ukraine. Biden's strategy has always been to avoid direct confrontation with Russia's President Putin. Therefore, the U.S. president can only deliver limited aid to Ukraine, and they are mostly indirect. However, many believe Biden shows signs of weakness by doing this and suggest that a hardline posture against Russia will bring Putin to order. Russia has hit back at the West, particularly the EU, through its oil and gas supplies to EU member countries. Shortly after the sanctions imposed on Russian banks, Putin replied by forcing all payments for Russian oil and gas to be made in the Russian ruble to enable the currency to gain some stability as its value was plummeting. After a while, Russia started to reduce the amount of gas supplied through its Nord Stream 1 pipeline and ultimately stopped delivering gas to Europe. Russia is Europe's largest supplier of oil and gas. In fact, most EU countries like Germany need Russia for more than 60% of their gas. Following the closure of the Nord Stream 1, the Nord Stream 2 was sabotaged and eventually closed down. Russia has been accused widely of damaging the pipeline as a form of retaliation against the EU sanctions. This has brought all of Europe into an energy crisis as the search for other forms of energy has intensified. It is quite obvious that President Biden doesn't want a repeat of World War I or II, and the president certainly doesn't want a nuclear crisis on his hands. Moreover, considering the nuclear arsenal both countries possess, an all-out nuclear war between both will probably cause the deaths of almost half of the world's population. Putin is known to be a very stubborn man, one who doesn't bow down in the face of defeat, and will probably do anything to avoid the reality of defeat. Considering all this, we may see the reason for Biden's limited action, or inaction, as some might say. However, at what cost? A war that could have been prevented before it started has cost the lives of thousands of military personnel, including more than 6,000 civilian deaths, with 397 of them being children. The refugee situation is also worsening by the day. UNICEF reports that more than 5 million civilians have been rendered homeless due to the fighting. Many Americans, especially Republicans, feel that it was Biden's weak response in the first place that gave Russia the boldness to invade Ukraine. Among most U.S. citizens, there is a sense of frustration, anger, and impotence. Why can't the world's biggest military superpower intervene? A percentage of people believe that direct military intervention is probably one of the best ways to end the conflict. Adam Kinzinger, a Republican congressman and war veteran in Afghanistan and Iraq, believes that the U.S. government should declare a no-fly zone in Ukraine to disrupt Russian operations and therefore give the less equipped Ukrainians a fair fight. However, the Biden administration has firmly rejected the idea amid fears that it might result in a confrontation between two nuclear-armed nations. To avoid a scenario like what happened in Syria in 2011, U.S. military action might be a necessity. Even Ukrainian President Zelensky has asked for more military assistance from the U.S., especially in terms of guns, missile defense systems, advanced missile systems, and warplanes. Despite facing tough challenges in Ukraine, it seems like Putin is not backing down anytime soon. With the recent mobilization of civilians who are already fighting on the front lines, Putin has started to lose the support of the Russian people who believed in his vision at the start of the war. These unmotivated, undertrained military personnel are no match for the Ukrainian territorial defense forces who would give their lives to protect their land from any external incursions. In recent times, Putin has increased his attacks on civilian buildings and infrastructures to push Ukrainians into a tough corner, especially with the upcoming winter, though many attribute the recently increased attacks to retaliation for Ukraine's attack on the Crimean Bridge. In conclusion, Biden's response has not been strong enough, and stricter actions may be required to force Putin's hand. Putin seems to be fighting a longer war than he expected, and a little amount of push from the U.S. and its allies might force him to end his military campaign in Ukraine. Biden's presidency has been generally criticized, as his approval rates state. However, success in this war could get him back on track, despite the many economic challenges faced by America. Why has Biden been slow to respond to Putin? What are the implications of this for the war? Do you see Biden as a strong leader? What actions can be taken by the Biden administration to end this conflict? Let me know in the comment section below.